My Lords, I'd like to thank the Noble Lord Adonis for raising this issue. As a former further education lecturer who specialised in teaching 16 to 18-year-olds, as the founder and supporter of Debating Matters, a competition designed to politically engage this age group of 16 to 18-year-olds, I'm passionate about young adults paying attention, or our adults paying attention to encouraging this age group to be informed and empowered. But I just disagree that giving them the vote is the way to do it. I have a question, which is, why is the demand for votes for 16-year-olds, why has it become so popular amongst policy pundits and politicians? It's not because of a mass movement of teenagers demanding the right for votes. Unlike previous fights for the vote, working-class male suffrage, the female suffragettes, there's no mass agitation on the streets. But there's a lot of energy that goes into a rather top-down campaign. Like the Noble Lord Hannan, I especially noted the enthusiasm for votes for 16-year-olds after the 2016 Brexit referendum. That referendum result was often posed generationally as a vote by selfish oldies, blue-haired pensioners in the provinces, middle-aged gammon in red wall areas, all those reactionary types, old people selling out the future prospects of the under-18s who would have to live with the consequences for longer. I think, therefore, there's a danger that this leads to an attempt or an aspiration for generational gerrymandering. I also worry that there's an attempt here at flattering the young as a homogenous group, while going hand in hand with stirring up ageist prejudices. There's a trend more broadly that sometimes assumes that the young should be listened to and deferred to as a progressive act in and of itself. The self-conception by many people in institutions and political parties that they are too pale, stale and male means that there are often attempts at buttering up the young. At a recent debate on gender identity and trans prisoners in this very House, a variety of noble lords suggested that this House is just too old-fogyish to understand that the young are pro-transgender identity and we oldies should all get with the programme. Often the inference is that those of us who are gender critical, for example, are just old dinosaurs from an early era of women's liberation movement. But should we assess the merits of a case through a generational prism? If the majority of young people are, for example, at the moment censorious and support no platforming, should we just give up on the principles of free speech to satisfy a younger cohort? I don't think so. But back to the direct matter in hand, my core objection is that lowering the voting age to 16 compromises voter independence, and I want to explore some of the contradictions raised by the noble Baroness Faulkner. The noble Lord Adonis has already emphasised that the focus of this expanded franchise should be the school. And that is a reminder that 16 to 18-year-olds are indeed still at school, and they are not considered at the moment as independent adults. Logically, those who now took up votes for 16-year-olds should view teenagers as young adults capable of making all decisions for themselves, and I'd listen to that then. Yet the opposite is the case. A swathe of infantilising cross-party initiatives make the young even more dependent in the present period, more dependent on adults who are charged with treating them as people to be protected, looked after and chaperoned. You have to be 18 to buy cigarettes, to buy alcohol, adverts for under 18s are banned and so on and so forth. I mean, try being a 16-year-old and having a drink in a pub and see whether adult society thinks that you are responsible enough to be trusted to make up your own mind or make your own decisions. And indeed, as we've heard, everything from the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child to legislation and safeguarding rules all define those under the age of 18 as children these days. And in that context, the state acts as hand-holding protectors. This hardly suggests a contemporary confidence in that age group as capable of adult responsibility. And I might disagree with that, but you can't have it both ways. Our society seems to be increasingly uncomfortable with the idea of these young people as morally autonomous adults. Their very ages making them dependent on state institutions and therefore, by the way, open to state political influence. I would suggest that while that's the case, we can't give them the vote. I stress the importance of independence, not to query the competence of the young, but to avoid degrading the meaning of voting, which is ideally a democratic right exercised by autonomous, independent citizens, not to be viewed as an extracurricular extension of civics lessons. To conclude, 16 to 18-year-olds, that age group can be smart, inquisitive, mouthy, politically savvy, inspiring. Yes, of course, they can sometimes be immature, infuriating, narcissistic, and somebody asked us to remember what we were like at 16. I'm afraid that's it. But the point is not that 16-year-olds are not smart, bright, wonderful, brilliant people. The argument that has been used here today is that in order to demonstrate our interest in their interests, we have to give them the vote, like a bribe or something. The idea that the only way that politicians will notice issues concerning the age group of 16 to 18-year-olds, or anyone younger for that matter, is that they have the vote, insults surely the democratic process, and it patronises the young as though they need something in order to see that they're being taken seriously. To note, political parties at the moment are failing to inspire the young who are voters. They're failing to inspire 18-plus voters who can vote. So perhaps what we need to do is concentrate on improving politicians rather than expanding the franchise, which might be a distraction from a much deeper problem. And just finally, to those who have today compared the argument that votes for women are the same as votes for young people, I would just like to remind them that those who opposed votes for women in the past did so on the basis that they were dependent and childlike. Now we want to actually make dependent, childlike citizens have the vote. I'd watch that conflation of childhood and adulthood because it insults both sides.